The Nintendo Switch 2 is already loaded with some absolute bangers. We're talking AAA titles that push this console to its limits. Today, I'm counting down the top 15 best games you need to play right now. Let's get into it. Persona 3 Reload takes the classic 2006 JRPG and rebuilds it from the ground up. And honestly, it hits different now. You play as a high school student who just transferred to a new city, and on your first night, you discover this hidden hour called the Dark Hour. Basically a secret 25th hour where monsters called shadows roam, and most people turn into coffins. You join a group called SEES that fights back using personas, which are these manifestations of your inner self that you summon in battle. The combat is turn-based, but flows fast. You exploit enemy weaknesses, chain attacks, and manage your team's skills. Outside of fighting, you're literally living a high school life, going to class, hanging out with friends, building social bonds that actually power up your personas. The Reload version adds fully voiced social links, reworked visuals, new music tracks, and smoother gameplay across the board.
You won! Well then, now let's move on.
Dynasty Warriors Origins strips it back to basics and focuses on one protagonist going through the chaos of ancient China's Three Kingdoms era. The battlefield feels more alive than ever. Thousands of enemies on screen, officers with their own movesets, and massive siege scenarios where the outcome actually shifts based on what you do. Combat is fluid and satisfying. You're switching between weapons mid-fight, parrying, launching combo strings, and using Musou attacks that clear entire crowds in seconds. The story follows the political tension between Wei, Wu, and Shu alliances forming, betrayals happening, and big characters like Cao Cao and Liu Bei doing their thing. It's not deep storytelling, but it knows what it is. The Switch 2 version runs the chaos at a smooth frame rate, which makes those massive battles feel genuinely epic. Pure action, zero stress.
Appears so effortless. I see that as your strength as a warrior. And open.
Dragon Quest VII Reimagined is one of those games that rewards patience, and if you give it that time, it gives back a lot. The world starts, almost completely empty islands have vanished, and you're trying to figure out why. You collect stone fragments, travel back in time to each island's past, solve its crisis, and bring it back to the present. That loop sounds simple, but each island is basically its own mini-story, with its own characters and problems. The combat is classic turn-based JRPG, no flash, just strategy. You manage a party, pick skills, and grind out job classes that let you mix and match abilities over time. The reimagined version modernizes the visuals and quality of life stuff while keeping that old-school soul intact. It's a long game, genuinely long, but the writing is warm and charming throughout. Each town you restore feels like an actual win. Yakuza 0 Director's Cut is set in 1988 Japan, and you're playing two characters. Kiryu, a young Yakuza trying to clear his name after being framed for a murder, and Majima, a club manager with a violent past trying to get back into the organization. The story weaves between them, and it is genuinely gripping. The director's cut adds new story chapters, extra cutscenes, and cleaned-up visuals. Street combat is brawler-style punching, kicking, slamming guys into walls, switching between fighting styles depending on the situation. But outside the main story, there is so much going on. You're managing real estate businesses, doing karaoke, playing classic Sega arcade games, completing bizarre side stories involving all kinds of weird Tokyo citizens. The world feels lived in, and the side content never feels like filler. It's funny, then serious, then brutal, all in the same hour. Trails in the Sky First Chapter is a JRPG that takes its time and builds something genuinely special through it. You follow Estelle and Joshua, a pair of trainee bracers, basically licensed adventurers, traveling across the Kingdom of Liberl, completing jobs and getting stronger. The combat is grid-based and tactical. Positioning matters, turn order matters, and each character has arts and crafts that make fights feel like small puzzles. What really carries this game, though, is the writing. Every NPC in every town has actual dialogue that changes as the story progresses. The world feels real because people in it feel real. The bigger plot slowly unfolds through the second half, and it ties everything together in a way that makes the slow build completely worth it. This first chapter is genuinely just the start of a massive saga, and the Switch 2 version runs it beautifully with updated performance and visuals. Pokémon Pokopia takes the series in a completely different direction, focusing on creativity and connection rather than traditional battles. You play as a Ditto disguised as a human, exploring a quiet, abandoned world and slowly bringing it back to life. The core loop revolves around gathering resources, shaping the environment, and building habitats that attract different Pokémon. What makes it stand out is how abilities replace tools. Each Pokémon you meet unlocks new ways to interact with the world, like growing plants or reshaping terrain. Instead of catching creatures, you collaborate with them, forming a small community that evolves over time. The story adds a subtle emotional layer, set in a world where humans have disappeared, giving your actions more meaning. It's a slower, more thoughtful experience, but the freedom it offers makes it surprisingly addictive and refreshing. Mario Kart World is exactly what you'd expect, and then more. You've got your carts, your items, your chaotic races, but World adds a massive open map connecting all the tracks together. Between races, you're actually driving through this interconnected world, finding shortcuts, collecting coins, and unlocking new routes. The track list is huge, and the new courses are some of the most creative in series history. Multi-level cities, gravity-flipping space sections, underwater tunnels that mess with your handling. New items shake up the chaos in fun ways, and the item balancing feels tighter than ever. Online play is smooth on Switch 2 hardware, with virtually no lag in races. The roster is expanded with new characters, and the customization options for carts are deeper now. Solo Grand Prix is satisfying, but the real magic is still multiplayer, either couch co-op or online with friends. Final Fantasy Tactics: The Ivalice Chronicles is a strategy RPG set in a war-torn kingdom where politics and religion are just as dangerous as any battlefield. You play as Ramza, a young noble watching his country collapse from the inside, while a hidden conflict brews beneath the surface. Battles are fought on grid-based maps, where height, positioning, and job classes determine everything. You build your party over time, changing jobs, learning skills, mixing abilities to create powerful combinations. The depth here is real. Theory crafting your team is half the game. The Chronicles version brings the original FFT together with updated visuals, rebalanced difficulty, quality of life improvements, and some new story content that fills in gaps from the original lore. The narrative is dense and dark. It doesn't treat you like a kid. War here is shown as complicated, messy, and full of moral grays.
I'm sorry.
Monster Hunter Stories 3: Twisted Reflection is the RPG spin-off of the mainline Monster Hunter series, and it carves out its own identity completely. You play as a rider, someone who bonds with monsters instead of hunting them, and you're investigating a phenomenon called Twisted Reflection that's corrupting monsters across the land, making them violent and warped. You collect monster eggs, hatch them, raise them as partners called monsties, and build a team for turn-based combat. Battles use a rock-paper-scissors style of power, speed, and technical moves, and reading enemy patterns to counter correctly is the core loop. It's genuinely satisfying once it clicks. The story is warmer and more emotionally driven than mainline Monster Hunter, building real bonds between characters and their monsters over time.
Keep it up.
Yeah! We did it!
Dragon Quest I and II HD 2D Remake. Two legendary RPGs into one release, and gives them a visual treatment that is honestly jaw-dropping. The HD 2D style pixel art characters, layered over detailed 3D environments with dramatic lighting, makes worlds that were originally made of tiles feel cinematic and alive. Dragon Quest I is short and simple, a solo hero on a classic quest to defeat the Dragon Lord, but it holds up as a tight, focused adventure. Dragon Quest II expands things with a party of 3 and a larger world to explore. Both games keep their original turn-based combat intact, with some quality-of-life improvements, faster battles, better inventory management, and no random encounter fatigue. The music has been fully orchestrated and sounds phenomenal through Switch 2 speakers. For newer players, this is a brilliant entry point into a franchise that shaped modern JRPGs. Octopath Traveler 0 is a prequel to the original game, set hundreds of years before its events, and it uses the same HD 2D visual style to stunning effect. You pick from 8 travelers, each from a different corner of the world, with their own backstory, job class, and combat style. The 8 stories are independent at first and weave together as you progress. Combat uses the break and boost system. Every enemy has weaknesses you exploit to break their guard. Then you unleash boosted attacks for massive damage. It's deep and rewarding once you understand the rhythm. Each traveler also has a unique field skill that changes how you interact with towns and NPCs. One can challenge anyone to a fight. Another can steal. Another can learn secrets through conversation. The writing ranges from dark tragedy to lighthearted adventure, depending on the character.
I've got it! Be strong! Time to strike!
Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade is not a straight remake. It's a reimagining of the Midgar section of the original game, expanded into a full-length action RPG. You play as Cloud Strife, a mercenary-turned eco-terrorist ally in a massive dystopian city called Midgar, run by the Shinra Corporation, which is literally draining the planet's life energy for power. Combat mixes real-time action with a tactical pause system, where you queue up abilities and magic for your party members. Switching between characters mid-fight to chain attacks feels fluid and cinematic. The Intergrade version adds the intermission chapter starring Yuffie, new combat options, and the best visual performance the game has seen. The story expands on the original in ways that set up something bigger and more ambiguous. It's loud, emotional, and technically impressive.
That it?
Cyberpunk 2077 Ultimate Edition on Switch 2 is genuinely one of the most impressive technical achievements on the console. Night City is massive, a neon-drenched vertical megacity, packed with corpo towers, slums, gangs, black market ripper docks, and stories in every corner. You play as V, a mercenary who ends up sharing their mind with a dead rockstar legend named Johnny Silverhand after a heist goes wrong. The main story is personal and high stakes. You're trying to survive while this other consciousness slowly takes over. Side quests here aren't filler. Many of them are full narratives with real choices and consequences. The first-person gameplay mixes gunplay, hacking, stealth, and melee combat with deep RPG progression. You spec your character how you want, and the game adapts. The Ultimate Edition includes the Phantom Liberty expansion, which adds a new district, new story, and new mechanics. Resident Evil Requiem is the most intense entry in the series in years. Set in a crumbling coastal city hit by a new bioweapon outbreak, you play as 2 protagonists whose paths cross throughout the story, and the contrast between how they handle survival makes the tension feel different every time you switch. The over-the-shoulder third-person gameplay is tight and deliberate. Ammo is scarce, enemies hit hard, and the environments force you to think before you move. The creature design is some of the best in the franchise. Things you haven't seen before that move in ways that genuinely unsettle you. Exploration is rewarded with resources and lore, but backtracking carries real risk. There's a crafting system that rewards you for exploring thoroughly and managing what you find. The story blends corporate conspiracy with survival horror in a way that builds real dread.
Think I want a second opinion.
Donkey Kong Bananza is the game that shows exactly what Switch 2 hardware can do, and it does it with pure joy. DK is back in a massive 3D platformer, where destruction is the central mechanic. Almost everything in the environment can be punched, ripped apart, or smashed through. Walls, floors, ceilings, entire terrain chunks. You're literally reshaping levels as you go. That creates platforming puzzles that have no fixed solution. You can brute force your way through, or find clever paths by breaking the geometry. The world design is layered and vertical, with secrets hidden inside the terrain itself, not just on the surface. Bananza also introduces a co-op partner system, where a second player joins as a character with complementary abilities. And the collaboration in puzzle solving is genuinely clever. The boss fights are massive, loud, and creative. The music is a complete banger from start to finish.
Enemies guarding these routes, so use all the power at your disposal to take on a host of powerful foes.
That's the top 15 AAA games on Nintendo Switch 2. The console is absolutely stacked. Drop a comment on which one you're playing first. If this helped, hit subscribe and I'll keep the recommendations coming. See you next one.